Alright guys, so we still have the Thanksgiving banner live over on the NA version of the game, and the servant that should be on raid up still right now is King Hassan, or just the old man on the mountain, Hassan, whatever you want to call him, right? The solo god guy, grand assassin, whatever you want to call him. He should be on raid up, and some of you may be wondering if it's worth going and summoning for this guy. Now, personally, just my opinion, while he is really good as a solo type servant, I think solos have kind of all but died out when it comes to FGO. Like, you could still do them, but I don't think they're like as necessary because our boxes are so much stronger and the supports that we have are just so insane. But you know, there's still like a place for them. They're still fun to do, and Hassan is really good at just doing solos, as we'll talk about in today's video. And you obviously don't have to just exclusively use him as a solo servant. You can bring people like Merlin and Koyenskaya when she comes out waiver to kind of help him get back to using his NP and just give him buffs that he's going to appreciate. But before we actually go ahead and start with this video, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for daily FGO content, and peep the streams that are linked down in the description down below for those weekday streams at 6 p.m. EST. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and just jump right into this, starting off with his hits. Now, the first thing you'll probably notice when it comes to Hassan's hits is that he's rocking a triple buster deck, and that is to consistently allow him to do really good damage if you're going to use him in, like, let's say, a solo quest. So this is really good for doing that, right? It kind of allows him to clear through people, very similarly to someone like, say, Ku Alter, who as a solo servant is also really good at just clearing out the enemies very, very quickly. However, as a solo servant, it does mean that he's really going to be relying on getting crits on that arts card, but uniquely as a solo servant, he's an assassin, meaning that his quick card is not only really good, but his natural star gen is insanely high, and since you're pretty much going to be always doing brave chains with this guy, and unironically, the 6-hit extra attack is going to come in clutch when it comes to genning stars, getting those crits on the arts card shouldn't be too difficult. It's kind of just getting lucky for it to land on there, because when it does, this guy's just got like flat 1% NP gain, meaning those crits are going to refund a metric ton of his NP back. And so overall, it does like kind of end up working out because he's an assassin, which is ironic because assassins have like one of the lowest modifiers in the game for damage. If you didn't know, certain classes have different damage modifiers. So like, let's say if somebody's an Avenger, they're just kind of inherently going to do a lot of damage, or like say a Lancer's going to do a lot of damage, but assassins inherently just do less damage because of their class modifier. So the Buster thing kind of helps him out with that, and still just doing good consistent damage. But then because he's an assassin, he can actually gen good stars because of his really strong quick and extra attack, and then refund really easily on that arts card. So it just makes him a really, really good servant to use. But it also helps that all of his skills are pretty good as well. Now, if we just want to go ahead and start gutting into this, starting off with skill 1, originally he just had like a really strong guts. It was a guts that lasted for 5 turns, with the skill itself being on a 7-turn cooldown, and it gave him a massive 5k heal. But then they just went absolutely bonkers with this thing. They were like, okay, what if we just tacked on a billion different effects? And so basically, he gets this Abyss of Death buff for those 5 turns that the Guts is active. And just off rip, as long as he has the Abyss of Death thing, right, and he has his Guts, he has a 30% Buster buff for 5 turns. But if he ever loses the Guts, then he gets a 50% Buster buff for the turn that he lost the Guts. He gets a 20% battery, and then he removes the Abyss of Death. So yeah, he does a little bit less damage like over time or whatever, but he just goes like Super Saiyan 3 for that turn and just starts Krakatoing people. And then just also gets a nice little battery. Now, I think he probably should have gotten the 20% battery guaranteed, and then also got like 50% whenever the Guts procced, but it just makes him really insane because as a solo servant, you're gonna have your Guts proc. And if the Guts procs, then you're just gonna obliterate the enemy even easier, because for that turn, especially if you have his other Buster buff up from his other skills, you're just going to slam them into the ground. But this is just a very, very good upgrade that he did get, because you guys know that I like my servants to be able to do good, consistent damage over numerous turns just based on how fights are like going in FGO right now and how they're generally a lot longer. So you want your servants to be more consistent, and this actually does help him out with consistency, because as long as that Abyss of Death is on him, he's going to have a 30% Buster buff that actually segues really good into his second skill, because he gets a 20% attack buff for 3 turns on this skill. And that's going to multiply into that Buster buff to just give him good solid damage over the course of the 3 turns that the attack buff is up, but also not have his damage completely fall off, because he'll still at least have the Buster buff from the first skill. This is also giving him really solid defense, 40% for 1 turn, a nice 25k heal, and 100% debuff resistance for 3 turns. Now, he does also have magic resistance, so this is really like 117% debuff resistance that he has innately, which is really good. He's also just inherently immune to charm as well. But this just kind of is really nice for like getting around attack downs or defense downs or stuns, just generic good stuff that you want on your solo servant. Also, the heal is very nice because whenever he does proc the guts, he's going to be at 5k health, and then this can automatically bump him back up to 7500. So even if you're not using someone like Merlin around him to kind of keep him topped off, he at least has a way to kind of keep himself in the game. The only thing that I wish is that I wish that defense buff was actually 3 turns, and maybe they'll buff this in the future, you know, slap on like a 30 or 50% crit buff for 3 turns, bump that defense to 40% for 3 turns, and call it a day. Finally, there's his last skill, which is just big Buster buff for 1 turn, right, 50%. And then he actually gets a buff to the insta-kill chance, technically, because he reduces all the enemy's insta-kill resistance by 100% for 3 turns. Now, kind of have to explain insta-kill for newer players. That doesn't mean he has a 100% chance to insta-kill enemies. Every enemy in the game, depending on rarity, if they're a servant, and even just what enemy they actually are, has their own insta-kill built into their kit, right? They have their own death rate. And usually, even with this up, and even with the passive that he has to like have the passive 5% chance to just insta-kill people, that doesn't mean you're just gonna like be insta-killing servants. It's generally really hard to insta-kill them, but you could actually use this to all but guarantee that you're going to insta-kill a bronze enemy, give yourself a really good shot at insta-killing a silver, and then kind of being a toss-up on some gold enemies. Again, kind of a lot to go into with like each individual enemy having their own like death rate and all the servants having their own death rates. But just know, this is pretty much going to guarantee your insta-kills on bronze and silvers if they happen to be present for whatever fight you're doing. It makes it possible to kill some gold enemies, and servants just don't even bother because they're pretty much never going to get insta-killed. And that kind of segues into his NP. His NP is kind of just a big bungus NP, just does big damage, and then he has a chance to insta-kill. I'd like to see this get buffed in the future as well, as a side note. Maybe it drops some stars or something for him to play with, because his star gen is good, but you know, it would be nice to like guaranteed get like maybe 50 stars. Like maybe they give it a Jalter buff where it bombs 30, because this guy can easily get anywhere from like 20 to 30 stars depending on your Brave Chain, and if you've done the append skill to buff up your extra attack. But then having that would all but guarantee that every time he fires his NP in a Brave Chain, he's going to drop at least 50 stars for himself and do guaranteed crits. That, or I would like to have like some stacking buff that he's able to do. Either it reduces the enemy's Buster resistance down, right, so all of his subsequent NPs do more and more damage, or maybe he stacks a crit buff, like he gets 30% for 3 turns every time he fires the NP. I think something like that could be really good and kind of bring him into the more modern era of FGO. But overall, this guy is not bad. If you're going to choose to go summon for King Hassan, he's definitely going to be able to put in a bit of work for you as long as you have like proper supports for him, or if you just want to use him in some solo quests, he can definitely get that done for you. It's just, the reason I can't be like, yeah, you should definitely go for this guy, is just the fact that like a lot of the other servants around him are like a little more high value. For instance, like the Ereshkigal, Gull, the Nerocaster, and the Summer BB are just all really good servants for when the Buster meta comes out, because they're 50% battery Buster AoEs. You can just use them as your dedicated farmer, especially if you get them at like NP2 if not higher. Muramasa is going to be coming out for New Year's, and Muramasa is absolutely insane, and when I started JP, was my dedicated farmer for my arts teams. Like I would use him for everything neutral, even some stages where like archers were involved, I could get him to loop it because he's just that built different. Then again, I also believed he was so good that I went for NP2, so your mileage may vary at NP1, but even still right after that, you have Space Ishtar, who can literally be your Buster, Quick, or Art servant, right? So you just got to keep in mind that while like Hassan is really good, and he does have some value as a solo servant, it's still like the other guys around him might be more valuable. But then again, if you really liked Babylonia and you thought he was super sick in Camelot, just beating up Gawain and everything, then maybe you can go ahead and summon for this guy, throw a couple multis, and it's not like you're really going to be the end of the world or anything. Like it's not going to kill you to summon for him. Or will it? He is like the avatar of death after all. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace. Late, guys.